reunion of the West Coast division of
It was terrific.
Wickham alumni. This evening's bios and comments and reminiscences. We hope you enjoy it.
Well, as you know, I was involved in Friends World for 5.5 years. We were in Japan, my husband and my whole family, our two children, Andrea and Vanessa. And Bolton had worked on the Manhattan Project, and his birthday had been August 6th, so he had really a traumatic experience. I didn't know him at that time. I came to America only in 1951. And we were in Hiroshima, where we did some research on the atomic bomb victims. And I had been wanting to go to Japan ever since September 20th, 1939, but the war began September 1st, 1939 in Germany, and so I had a ticket, but I couldn't go. My father was a Zen Buddhist, and if you ask me why that's so strange, everybody does it in Germany, it was not so strange because the Germans were particularly interested in the Far East. And if you think the I Ching and so on were all translated by German scholars, so it's not that unusual. Anyhow, I was brought up as Zen Buddhist, and I had wanted to go and study theater because I was particularly into theater and acting and so on. And if you ever saw a film, Mephistopheles or Mephisto, a German film, the man this film is about was my teacher, my drama teacher in Germany. Anyhow, there we were in Hiroshima, and we were Quakers, and we knew something about Friends World. We had heard, this is in 1967, 68. We were in Philadelphia, and we were very involved in the civil rights movement around King and Fellowship House. And I actually stood with King on the picket lines when he wasn't yet the King, but a student. And we were very much into a Quaker action group, the whole Vietnam thing and so on. When we were going to Hiroshima, and so Quakers knew of us. So someone approached us and sent us a letter and said, could we design a program for the first class of Friends World, which Sandro belonged to but didn't come. And then 12 students arrived. Yes, we agreed. And then in Hiroshima we set up a program and so on. They sent some money, and we received them in Kobe. And when they got off from India in these outfits, which was absolutely marvelous. Not that I didn't have the same thing when I was in Nepal and in India and so on, but in Japan, as you already mentioned, was a so-called civilized country. Any case, so how would you introduce an American student into East Asian culture? Most Americans think, or most Western people think, that the Far East consists of Japan and China, and totally forgets Korea, in which I was particularly interested also, in comparison, and the whole political and cultural transmission and so on of culture and politics and all this sort of thing. So what do you do? What were we going to do? And so we came up with an idea that we would spend the first week or 2 weeks in a farm community where the students would either prepare the rice fields or harvest the rice fields. Then we would go to Kyoto when we were in Hiroshima and go into a temple complex. We would really be for 2 weeks in a temple and be exposed. And then we were going to Hiroshima and be in an industrial new city, with the addition, of course, that the atomic bomb exploded there. And so this is what we tried to present to the students, and it was really very difficult, as you already pointed out, for students who came from around the world to Japan to really understand that there was a country where drugs were absolutely forbidden, and if they were in, the college would simply be closed and we would be transported out, yes? Other students who had been very much aware, who came there directly and specifically, of course, there really the attitude clashed there. But I think in general it was very fascinating, I think, for most students who came. And we lived very closely together, and the reason I became really involved in Friends World after the first class, they wrote so-called evaluations, and what nonsense to say evaluations about people who we knew for months. And so we gave impressions of each other. And after we got the impressions, they offered us a job. Could we perhaps set up the center, which we did, and agreed to it. And it was very unfortunate. And my husband had a total breakdown, left, and I was left there in Japan with the first class of students. And he later went to America, and of course, and there I was. And that was really quite a tough thing. I really also wanted to leave at that time in a certain way because it was too much really. I couldn't really fulfill all the demands and expectations, and I felt what the students really needed and so on, but got a very good advisory board and things began to happen. Anyhow, this goes too long on. You can't believe what I experienced over in these years, you know. After I introduced them to Japan, I went to Korea with them. And you are not aware, and I don't wish it's too much. The Japanese have a total racial anti-Korean. They think of them as dirty and inferior and so on. And so Friends, yes, my sweetheart. So Friends for college students really became very important in going to Korea together with a class of very prestigious Japanese university, and then in Korea we connected with Seoul University and other universities and had a seminar there. Now, what I was particularly interested for the students to understand was what many students were not interested in when they came from Japan, was that the whole political and cultural picture of that country, you know, that Japan was America's junior partner in crime, yes? That not only junior partner, it became very senior, that the whole thing, the third world of Korea, we were very much involved with people like Han Sok-hon, like Kim Dae-jung, who just lost the election, and Kim Shi-ha. I mean, I had all these contacts, and they were very close friends of mine over a period of 20 years. I had met them before. So I really wanted to bring to the students a kind of different picture, even of the world, yeah? Which they certainly, many of them really took up. I mean, many of them really became involved in Korea and understood the whole work that really had to be done. You see, the Japanese, you know, are so unbelievable. Yeah. So smiling when they say yes, they mean no. And when we went to Hiroshima, there's the reason why we had to move to Kyoto was that two of our students who lived outside Hiroshima had grown marijuana. And a whole field hidden in the forest. And after they harvested, they carried it around, and they were arrested. Oh, wow. And then they came and went through 1,000 books. They thought we had hidden some other drugs in the library. I can't tell you. The whole thing. Really, we couldn't overcome. We had to move from one community to the other, yeah? And so I called some friends in Kyoto. I said, we need to move. And they called back and said, get the night train, there is a house. And I arrived there, and there was a physicist waiting with his wife. They wanted this much money. Oh, I said, no. We could only pay this much. And they looked at me, and then they gave it to me. And the reason they gave it to me was, as the astrologer had told him, the next person who came would be be welcomed by the spirit of the house.
Oh.
And indeed, and I very faithfully provided tea and rice and water every day for this house. Anyhow, the police arrived with the thick file and began for 4 hours to talk. And we charmed them. We simply charmed them. They went out, bought 30 pieces of cake, brought it, had it sent to us. After that, came and visited us. About a year later, there were various people with drugs bringing them in from India, and the police had gotten hold of this, and they were going to raid us, and someone phoned us and said the raid is going to be on, get rid of everything. And I, of course, knew, not directly, but indirectly, and they did get rid of it, and anyhow. So that close a relationship we had, that was important. But in any case, the reason I worked for the school was, well, how otherwise can one transform the world somewhat? I mean, our education system who educates for the status quo and doesn't educate just the knowledge and how to go about. Anyhow, that's why I worked and why I gave 5.5 years of my life.
So what year did you start? What year was it?
1968.
68.
1970. And then afterwards I left, the Hasegavas took over, and I continued, I went to Korea, but then I was threatened with death there because I knew all the people, meanwhile martial law had become, and then they beat me up quite severely, and then they thought I should go out. And then I stayed in Japan and worked with the rescue committee in Korea, and then Kim Dae-jung was kidnapped in Korea, in Japan, you know, the man who, and I became very much involved in the whole thing, and went on a speaking tour in America. And then I was put on the blacklist of the Korean government, on which I still am, and I wanted to go over for the election. What I really wanted to do was to try to convince the two Kims to really throw the thing together. But they couldn't, their constituency, it was really because it's so regional. Anyhow, then I went, I did lots and lots of things. I was also in the Philippines, where I worked with the opposition there, particularly Paul Frere, you know, the pedagogy of the impressed. And I worked with the Philippine Educational Theatre Association. And this is really, you know, for conscientization and so on. That's really, because I'm in that sense, in the liberation, and I was in Indonesia, and I was terribly, terribly involved. Anyhow, I came back 4 years ago after when I was 63, and thought I couldn't stay in Japan because I had become such an institution. You know, I was on a TV program every week, and you know, once you are put into such a position, you can be yourself still. And I have always been that. But I wanted to come back. I wanted to find out what was going on here. Anyhow, I came back to LA, went to a meditation center, but I went there to teach, but got sick. Downtown LA.
Oh, yeah.
Forget it. Anyhow, I then ended up in this part of the world in Santa Cruz, where I live at the Resource Center for Nonviolence. I'm continuing politically to be totally involved here. I'm writing, by the way. People always ask that I write. Yes, I have begun to write them. And on hand of that, I want to show my transformations. I sit every morning and I meditate on 3 principles. And that is loving kindness, sympathetic joy, to take great joy in the fortune of others, and of course compassion. And those 3 things perhaps I've done for Friends World, but I have shared some of my life with them. But it was really great. And this is wonderful that you gather that, and I hope it will really stay in contact. And I hope that something like aid or something, when we talked about this, if they should ever happen or anything, I think we should really have a kind of network where we would care for each other. And students who had come there, we wanted to have a reunion in Mombasa.
Where are your daughters now?
Vanessa is still in Japan and married a Panamanian, a diplomat, and didn't like the life. And her 10-year-old daughter and herself lived in a little one-room apartment, for $1,000 a month, these stupid things in Tokyo. And she interprets and dolmetsches and interprets. That's how she earns her money, and she does dancing. And she doesn't really want to live in America. And Andrea, who was older, who went for one semester to Friends World in India, was going to study medicine, and wanted to go to India to find out about spiritual healing. And came to the Indian center and really found it after having been at our center, was totally disappointed. This is not because we were better or so on. There was no challenge she really felt, very little. She had done everything. She had finished high school at 13. She had taken all the things with Friends World College, all the lectures, everything. She had done everything. She spoke fluent Japanese. So it was really curious what happened at the Indian center. She said, we came around and were into drugs and so on. It was very strange. So what happens to her? She goes on a trip, meets Rajneesh, and becomes his disciple. For 12 years. But that's it. And came back of course, to Oregon also. And her partner also, when she met them and later married, they left the commune ranch 4 years ago, before the whole thing happened. And Andrea, this was really fascinating, had been very much she belonged to the group of Rajneesh, the inner circle, and cleaned the garden and his bathroom and bedroom. And it's really incredible. And the whole thing, and her husband, Don, was the person in charge of the whole development of the ranch. An extraordinary. But both of them were not into politics or anything of this sort. Dan was threatened with death. Don was one of the people whom they tried to poison. Anyhow, I should stop. I thought, anyhow, and the interesting thing is they left and had no money or anything, and she became a secretary, and now just is applying, if you can imagine that, to law school. She just got 42 out of 48. And I said to her 3 days ago on the phone, I said, well, my dear, from Pune to law school, either Harvard, Yale, or Stanford. Well, my dear, what kind of law then will you do? Well, she said, she called me Amma. She said, for 12 years, nothing to regret. Nothing. I found out who I am. I'm totally free.
When did they leave Rajneesh?
4 years ago. Just before the whole
Just before?
Yeah, 4 years it was.
It's good they escaped all that, and that must have been terrible.
Yeah, well, yes, we never really talked about. They were offered a tremendous sum of money to write a book, but Andrea turned it down. She would not.
Been several.
Yeah, but she would not. She would not have. She said the experience was so, because all of this thing happened, this did not make her experience any less important for herself.
No.
Had nothing to do with Rajneesh or the others. Yeah, so it's really fascinating. And Walter, my husband, died. He came back, he married a Japanese girl and died 2 years later of a heart attack. Really tragic.
And what about Concord and the Wilson naval
Of
weapons
Brian
station?
Wilson and so on, I'm very much involved or was involved in part of, the whole, I worked with the vets and Witness for Peace.
Box Spitzer?
Yeah, I heard, but I'm at the Resource Center for Nonviolence where I live. And since I lost my husband, all the money or anything I ever had, so I have a very little income, tiny little income. And I really live above poverty, which is perfectly fine. And at my age, one can't really make any money in this country or so on. But that's fine too. And so I'm totally involved in the Resource Center, who has known some of my work, lets me stay there for less money and so I work with them and this various organizations. Yeah. And particularly though with the Quakers. I really think that the independent Quaker meetings, the unprogrammed meetings, are really the last strongholds in this country almost, where something can still going on.